It started with a doorbell that wouldn't stop ringing. Not the gentle kind of ring, but the impatient get-out-here-now kind. I opened the front door, still wearing pajama pants and holding a slice of burnt toast. Outside stood my wife Darla, fully dressed in a red silk gown with mascara smudged under her eyes and a voice shaking with adrenaline. "I forgot my backup heels," she snapped, pushing past me like I wasn't even there. "No, good morning. No thanks, just perfume and panic." It was the fourth time this week she'd forgotten something and barged back in while getting ready for events I wasn't invited to. Gala dinners, corporate parties, weekend brunches with the girls. Except one of the girls had posted a group photo the night before, and Darla wasn't in it. I didn't confront her. I didn't yell. I just watched. That night she texted me, "Come to the Crestview Ballroom at 8. I have a surprise for you." Surprise? She hadn't surprised me since 2017. Back then it was a chocolate cake and a handwritten note. I cried over that note for 3 days. This time, I expected nothing sweet, just answers. I showed up in a wrinkled button-down and old shoes. I wanted her to see what I looked like after years of being ignored. The ballroom was packed. Laughter echoed like thunder, and spotlights danced across champagne glasses. And there she was, on stage, holding a microphone. "Before we move on," she said, eyes locked on mine, "I have to say something personal, something important." She called me up. The crowd turned. I felt like I was walking into a courtroom. "I've given my everything," she said loudly, "but not to me, to them. But sometimes people grow apart. Sometimes one person has to carry all the weight while the other just watches from the sidelines." Gasps, awkward chuckles. I stood there frozen. Then she dropped it like a performance piece. "I'm giving him a choice right now, in front of all of you. Stay and listen, or walk away." You could hear a pin drop. One of her coworkers whispered, "She actually did it." I looked at Darla, this polished, ruthless stranger, and knew exactly what I had to do. No speech, no drama. I reached into my pocket, took out my keys, and let them jingle as I walked. 1 step, 2 steps. She didn't call my name. 3 steps. She didn't blink. 4 steps, she smiled. 5 steps later, I opened the door and disappeared from her life, and the camera crews and the applause. But that was just the beginning, because what I found after leaving that room made her regret ever giving me that choice. I didn't drive home that night. I didn't even know where I was going. I just kept walking, keys in hand, the hum of the city swallowing my thoughts. Somewhere between the ballroom doors and the empty side street where I eventually collapsed onto a cold bench, it hit me. She'd rehearsed that moment. Every word, every gesture. She wanted to humiliate me, not just end things. She needed a stage, an audience, a clean image of herself painted as the martyr who tried everything. And I was supposed to play the spineless husband who just couldn't keep up. But here's the thing about pushing someone too far. Eventually, they stop bending. They break quietly. And when that happens, they start paying attention. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on that bench until the sun came up. My phone buzzed 5 times. 4 of those were from people who were at the event saying how awkward it was or how brave she had been. One message was from a number I didn't recognize. "You don't know me, but you need to see this. She's not who you think she is." Attached was a short video. I hesitated, hands trembling like I just crawled out of a wreck. I tapped play. It was Darla. Same red gown, same smile. But this wasn't the gala. This was hours earlier backstage in the green room. She was with that guy from the firm, the tall one with the smug jawline and the perfect posture. His hands were on her waist. Her voice whispered, "Are you sure he'll walk?" He grinned and said, "If not, we'll push him." I felt sick, like physically sick. This wasn't about falling out of love. It was a setup, a performance. They wanted me gone. Clean break, no messy divorce, no assets split. Just me walking off stage so they could rewrite the script. And I played my part perfectly. I wanted to scream. I wanted to call her, confront her, demand to know how long she'd been planning this. But instead, I saved the video because for once, I was going to do something differently. I wasn't going to argue. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to let her turn this into another stage show. I was going to wait, watch, let her believe she won, and then take everything back, one piece at a time. But the next morning she did something that even I didn't see coming, something that made everything far more complicated and dangerous. The next morning felt unreal. I hadn't slept. My eyes burned from staring into nothing, and my muscles ached from sitting on a park bench all night. Still, I wasn't ready to go home. Home wasn't mine anymore. It hadn't been for months. I just hadn't admitted it to myself. What was once ours had become hers piece by piece in small, unnoticed shifts. The change in tone, the locked drawers, the events I wasn't invited to. But now I had proof, and with it came clarity. I found myself standing outside my friend Felix's apartment. We hadn't spoken in nearly a year, not since he moved in with his girlfriend and became too busy for late-night video game marathons and cheap whiskey. But I had nowhere else to go, and I knew if I didn't knock, I'd fall apart in the hallway. He let me in without questions, though the look on his face said everything. I told him the short version, the ballroom, the public ultimatum, the video. He didn't say "I told you so," even though he could have. He just handed me coffee and said, "Whatever she's planning, you need to get ahead of it." And then the doorbell rang. I froze. It was too early for food deliveries, too random for coincidence. Felix opened the door while I hovered behind him. It was a courier holding a large white envelope addressed to me. No return address. I signed for it with a shaking hand, opened it slowly, and felt the blood drain from my face. Inside were two things, a printed photo and a typed letter. The photo showed Darla and the same man from the video, his arm wrapped tightly around her waist as she leaned into him, kissing his neck. It was time-stamped. It wasn't recent. It was from 6 months ago. 6 months. The letter was cold, professional, and devastating. Lol, since you've chosen to walk away, I'm assuming you understand what that means. I've already spoken to my attorney. You'll be receiving divorce papers soon. I suggest you cooperate quietly. I'm keeping the house. Of course, there's no point in dragging this through the courts. Let's just make this simple, Darla. She wanted to erase me. That's what this was all about. Public humiliation, legal control, emotional ambush. She didn't want closure. She wanted to rewrite the entire marriage as a mistake. Her mistake. And if I played it wrong, I'd be remembered as the bitter, forgettable man who walked out because he couldn't handle her ambition. I sat in silence, holding that letter like it was soaked in poison. And that's when Felix said something that lit a fire I didn't know I had left. She thinks you're done. That's why she's rushing. Because if you disappear quietly, she wins. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want to hurt her. I just wanted the truth to matter again. I wanted myself to matter. And the first step was digging deeper, because if she was willing to lie that easily, what else had she been hiding? What I found next didn't just shock me. It made me question if I ever really knew the woman I married at all. I spent most of that day pacing Felix's tiny apartment like a man trapped in someone else's skin. The photo, the letter, the performance at the gala, it all painted one thing clearly. Darla had spent months preparing for my erasure, and I had sleepwalked straight into it. But the thing about betrayal is that once it cracks open, everything starts leaking out. I couldn't shake the feeling that what I saw was just the surface. Her letter made it sound like she already had everything mapped out. House, divorce terms, even the narrative. But one line kept bouncing around in my head. Let's just make this simple. She'd never said that phrase in 10 years of marriage. It didn't sound like her. It sounded rehearsed, like a line meant to intimidate me, keep me quiet, passive the same way I'd been for years. So, I decided to stop being passive. Felix helped me dig first through the old iPad. She forgot I had access to an older model we used to use for shared calendars and bills. She hadn't touched it in over a year. It was buried in a drawer in my old nightstand, which I had grabbed in a rush when I left. I hadn't even remembered packing it. It still had access to her synced emails, her cloud backup, her photo archive. Within minutes, we uncovered dozens of things I wish I could unsee. There were recurring calendar invites labeled boardroom briefings, except they were at hotels. Always the same, too. Always at 7 p.m. on weekdays. No attachments, no meeting links, just vague titles and addresses. I checked one, then another. Each time the same man appeared in the photos stored on her phone, tucked into a folder she thought was hidden behind innocuous names like grocery lists or workout plan. The folder contains selfies, videos, location pings. Some were months old. Some were taken while I was texting her, asking if she was okay when she said she'd be working late. She hadn't just moved on. She had replaced me long ago and turned me into a placeholder, while she built an entirely different life in the background. Her silence, her coldness, the way she stared at her phone and smiled when she thought I wasn't watching. It had all been her saying goodbye long before I ever knew to leave. But it wasn't just the affair. That would have been almost easier. It was the way she documented everything like she was building evidence, not memories. Felix leaned over my shoulder as we scrolled through her emails. This isn't just cheating, man. This looks like planning. And then we saw the final confirmation. An email dated 6 weeks before the gala. Subject: timeline for transition. It wasn't from a lawyer. It wasn't from her job. It was from a real estate agent. She was in the process of buying a condo in her name only, and in the thread she mentioned that the divorce would be handled cleanly and that he won't fight back. She wrote that about me, like I was a predictable variable, like I would just fold. I sat there stunned, breathing through a rage I didn't know I was capable of. Not because she wanted to leave, but because she'd crafted the illusion so carefully that I didn't even know I was already gone. But the biggest twist hadn't come yet, because when I checked her sent messages, I found something meant for someone else. Sent the night I walked out of the gala. Something that proved this wasn't just about me. It was about someone I trusted, and they were in on it from the start. There's a moment when betrayal stops being emotional and starts becoming tactical. That was the shift I felt as I sat staring at the screen, scrolling through Darla's sent emails, trying to make sense of how deep this went. I thought I was just a heartbroken husband uncovering an affair. But the truth was darker, more coordinated, and it involved someone I never expected. The message was sent at 11:17 p.m., just hours after I walked out of the ballroom. The subject line read, Phase 2. That alone gave me chills. But what made my blood run cold was who it was sent to. Felix. Yes, Felix. The same Felix who handed me a cup of coffee while I was falling apart. The same one who let me sleep on his couch and said, "Whatever she's planning, you need to get ahead of it." I thought he was my only ally left, my last friend standing. But the email said otherwise. He walked just like you said he would. Do not mention anything about the condo yet. I'll handle the paperwork this week. If he asks questions, just play dumb. Also, make sure he doesn't check the iPad. He might still have access, and that will complicate things. Let's keep this clean. I'll talk to the lawyer again Monday. I couldn't breathe. The air felt like needles in my throat. I stared at Felix from across the room. He was heating up leftovers, casually chatting about a movie he wanted to watch later. Was it all fake? Every shoulder pad, every "I got you, man." Was he just managing me on her behalf? I snapped the iPad shut. He turned around. "You okay?" I didn't answer. Instead, I walked to the bathroom, locked the door, and stared at myself in the mirror. My face didn't even look familiar anymore. I wasn't L the husband or L the friend. I was just a mark, a soft, oblivious pawn in someone else's game. But now I wasn't just hurt. I was furious, and I was awake. I waited until after midnight. I lay on that lumpy couch, pretending to sleep, listening to Felix's footsteps, the hum of the fridge, the occasional cough. Then I slipped out quietly with the iPad and envelope in my bag. I didn't take anything else. I didn't need a confrontation yet. What I needed was leverage. And I had just the right person to call. There was one person Darla had always underestimated, her sister, Nora. They barely spoke, always clashing over values, money, and Nora's refusal to fake niceties at holidays. But me, Nora always liked me, respected me, said I was too good for Darla. I hadn't seen her in nearly a year, but I remembered something she told me once after one of our Thanksgiving fights. If she ever crosses a line you can't live with, call me. I'll help you burn the bridge behind you. I had thought it was a joke. It wasn't. I messaged her. She replied in 2 minutes. "Come over. I've been waiting for this day." Nora lived in the kind of apartment that told you exactly who she was. Sharp, uncluttered, honest to a fault. Nothing about it pretended to be more than it was. I hadn't seen her in a year, maybe longer. The last time was at a Christmas dinner where Darla showed up 2 hours late and barely looked me in the eye. Nora noticed everything even then, but she never pushed. She just poured me an extra glass of wine and said, "You deserve better than a woman who treats you like an afterthought." Now I was standing at her door with a bag full of betrayal and a heart that didn't feel like it belonged to me anymore. She didn't hug me. She opened the door, nodded once, and said, "Took you long enough." I stepped inside. She didn't ask questions. She just pointed to the kitchen table and I laid everything out. The letter, the photo, the email to Felix. I told her about the iPad, the videos, the fake meetings, the real estate deal Darla had lined up. I didn't hold anything back. When I finished, I expected Nora to say, "I told you so," or something bitter like, "I knew she'd do this." Instead, she said, "That's not even the half of it." She disappeared into her bedroom and returned with a small wooden box. Inside were printed screenshots, old text logs, even a flash drive. She slid it toward me like it was a grenade. I kept tabs after she started pulling away from the family, she said quietly. You weren't the only one. She ghosted. She stopped coming to our mom's doctor appointments, ignored calls from our aunt when she was in hospice. And when I called her out, she blamed you. Said you were emotionally stifling her, that you wouldn't let her grow. Said she had to cut toxic ties to become her best self. I felt like vomiting. Nora continued. She lied to everyone, not just about the affair, about her job, her finances, even her past. The guy she's with, that's not his first married woman. He does this. Gets in deep, helps them start fresh, then moves on after they ruins their old lives. I was reeling. So, she's just what, a puppet? Nora shook her head. No, she's the one holding the scissors. He's just her excuse. She showed me a screenshot from months earlier, an email Darla had accidentally forwarded to a mutual contact. It was a draft of a prenup, a new one meant for someone else. She wasn't just leaving me. She was preparing to replace me in every role I held. Husband, partner, even family. I was being erased, rewritten out of my own story. But I wasn't the only one. Nora leaned forward. Do you remember Aunt Meredith's inheritance? I nodded slowly. The one Darla said never came through. She lied. It did. You were both listed as joint beneficiaries, but Darla accepted the money alone, signed off without telling you. She forged your part. I found out 6 months ago, but I couldn't prove it until now. That was it. That was the moment something inside me snapped. Not in rage, but in purpose. This wasn't just emotional betrayal. This was calculated theft, manipulation, fraud. She had been building a version of herself that required me to vanish quietly and humiliated so she could step into her next life untouched. But she'd miscalculated because she thought I'd stay silent. I looked at Nora and she met my stare with a calm nod. We bring her down, she asked. No, I said. We bring out the truth. 2 days later, I walked into the office of a woman named Clarissa Bell. If Darla had a reputation for crafting illusions, Clarissa had one for tearing them apart. She was a forensic financial investigator, sharp as broken glass and twice as dangerous if pointed in the right direction. Nora had worked with her once before during a friend's ugly custody battle, and told me Clarissa had a knack for finding things people desperately wanted to stay buried. I handed her the flash drive, the email trail, and a copy of the inheritance paperwork Nora had managed to dig up. Clarissa barely blinked as she reviewed it. She's sloppy, she said flatly. She thought because you're quiet, you'd be compliant. But I've seen this before. People who control through chaos think silence equals weakness. What it really means is we collect everything while they run their mouths. The plan was simple. Don't fight Darla in the way she expected. No yelling, no emotional breakdowns, just cold, calculated exposure. And timing would be everything. Clarissa drafted a legal freeze on shared accounts backed by evidence of financial fraud regarding the inheritance. We filed for an injunction on the condo purchase, citing spousal deception and the concealed transaction that had been in motion before our separation was even declared. Within 72 hours, her deal fell apart. She didn't know yet, but she would. Meanwhile, I ghosted Felix. He tried to call twice. I didn't answer. He sent a text that read, I didn't have a choice, man. She promised to clear my debt. I didn't reply. Let him sweat. Let him wonder how much I knew and how far I'd go with it. Then came the night Darla finally reached out. After nearly a week of silence, she sent me a message as if nothing had happened. "Hey, hope you're doing okay. Can we meet up and talk like adults? No drama, just closure." Closure. That word again. The same one she used in her staged humiliation at the gala. The same one she probably used to justify emptying our joint account before I could react. I agreed to the meeting, but I chose the location. A quiet restaurant she hated. One she once called too plain, too honest. Perfect. She walked in looking like nothing had touched her. Not a hair out of place. Expensive coat, fake smile, soft voice. "You look well," she said, like I was some stranger she had fond but vague memories of. I nodded, didn't speak. She launched into a monologue about how she was sorry things had gotten messy, but we could still walk away clean, that she had already spoken with her lawyer and prepared something fair. I placed the folder on the table. She looked down. Her smile froze. Inside was a summary of Clarissa's findings, the bank freeze order, the halted condo transaction, and a statement outlining her forged signature on the inheritance acceptance. Her fingers trembled slightly as she closed the folder. "You don't want to do this," she whispered. "No, I said I didn't. But you did." The silence between us was heavy. For the first time, I saw fear behind her eyes. Not guilt, not regret, just pure stunned fear. Because, for the first time, she couldn't control the story. I wasn't walking away quietly. I was walking through the fire she lit and bringing the truth with me. "I'll be in touch," I said, standing up with my lawyer. And then I left her sitting there just like she'd once left me alone, surrounded by plans that had suddenly collapsed. The legal battle wasn't short, but it was clear-cut. Once Clarissa's evidence hit the courtroom, the judge didn't need convincing. The condo blocked and later sold off. The inheritance reopened for investigation with Darla forced to return half plus damages. Felix, he disappeared from both our lives after receiving a subpoena he never saw coming. And Darla, she tried to play the victim in court, but even her lawyer looked tired of her by the second hearing. The silence afterward was the best part. No more stage drama, no more gaslighting, no more walking on eggshells in my own home. I moved into a small cottage just outside town near a lake I didn't even know existed until Nora found the listing. She even helped me paint the porch and plant tomatoes in the backyard. Sometimes she'd swing by on weekends and bring pie just to remind me that not all ties are meant to be cut. Some are just waiting to be honored. I don't know if I'll fall in love again. That's not the point. The point is, I'm not the man who let someone else write the story of his life anymore. I'm the one holding the pen now. And Darla? She faded, the same way every mask eventually slips when there's no one left to impress. So, if you're sitting there reading this, if someone once stood in front of you and gave you a public ultimatum, hoping you'd shrink, hoping you'd disappear quietly, remember this. You're allowed to walk away, not in shame, but in strength.